So good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me? Yes. So I hope you had an enjoyable body time and spirit time and social time over lunch. And I would now like to welcome to our panel discussion of this afternoon, Foundations as Masters of Perseverance or Persistence. As Beate already said, I am your host of this panel. My name is Ann-Veruschka Jurisch, and I'm the Managing Director of the Ernst Schmidheiny Foundation. And just to say briefly something about the foundation I work for, we are surely also a master of persistence and perseverance, as we've been running the same project, one single project, for over 40 years, which is our core project, the Economy Weeks we run here in Switzerland. So I kind of know the topic of perseverance. So I would now like to briefly introduce my guests of this afternoon. I will later on make a more in-depth presentation of my guests. So here we have Lynda Mansson. She's the Director General of the MAVA Foundation based in Gland. And here is Andreas Kirchschläger. He's the CEO of the elea Foundation. He's based in Zurich, and he's also the Director of the Max Schmidheiny Foundation, which is kind of the brother or sister or whatever foundation of my foundation where I work for. And here we have Kathleen Cravero-Kristoffersson, who is the president of the Oak Foundation, headquartered in Geneva. So today we would like to discuss different forms and facets of persistence in foundations. So as Beate said this morning, it was more about short-term reacting on things which happen today, but now we would like to talk how foundations can do their things in the long term. So what all three foundations here have in common is a family involvement, a very strong family involvement, all three or the founder involvement. And just a quick survey among you, what do you think? Does the family involvement or the founder involvement in your foundations lead to more, less, or equal persistence as compared to foundations which are only run by professional people and no family involvement? So more or less or equal persistence.
For our case, as well for elea Foundation, with the Wuffli family behind it, as for the Max Schmidheiny Foundation, a lot more persistence through the patience and the long-term involvement of the families.
So more, okay. More. So Lynda, what about you?
I will also go with more. I think one of the benefits of being in a family foundation is the ability to have patient investment. And if it takes a long time, it takes a long time. There isn't that pressure for quick results.
Yes. Kathleen, what about you?
I would agree with that. I think at Oak Foundation we have a number of different programs, all of which represent a passion or a very real and lasting interest of the family, either multiple members of the family or one trustee. So this is something that, our passions don't change from day to day, so neither do their interests or investments.
So we unanimously agree that it would lead to more persistence, which is, I think, quite interesting to notice. So Kathleen, I would now like to introduce you and your work a little bit more in depth. You've been working for the Oak Foundation since 2009, and before that you have over 20 years of experience in the field of development cooperation, crisis prevention, and gender equality with UN agencies, so a really exciting career, and you hold a PhD in political science and a Master in public health. And the foundation you represent, the Oak Foundation, was set up by the Parker family, which has made their wealth with duty-free shops, is that right? Mm-hmm. And in 2015, the Oak Foundation has spent around $41 million in projects, and in more than 300 different organizations in over 39 countries, and you have a very broad spectrum of fields where you work in. Could you say maybe a few words in which fields you work?
Sure. Overall, per year, the grant-making budget for Oak is about $200 million. It's $40 million is for our biggest program is the environment program. We also work on issues affecting women, which is to stop interfamilial violence and to build women's movements. We work to end homelessness, also to stop the sexual abuse and sexual exploitation of children. We have an international human rights program, which is primarily civil and political rights, and then an education program, which focuses on how to shape public school curricula in a way that will respond to a wider variation in the way kids learn.
So a very broad spectrum of things you fund. I found a very exciting thing on your website, which is a grantee perception report, which is probably a thing which is rather unknown here in Switzerland, or maybe not so many foundations do this. Can you raise hands who is doing a grantee reception? Oh, you do, great. So one person, or, yeah, well, I have never heard about this, and it's a survey where you actually ask your grantees how happy you are with the work you do, and you openly report this, which I find absolutely remarkable, because, of course, when you ask people if they're happy or not, sometimes they're not happy with everything, and so it also involves some criticism. And you've been trying really hard to respond to the slight criticism you found a couple of years back, and you've been really working on those things, which I think is really remarkable. But one figure struck me in this grantee reception report. Small statistic says that your average duration of a grant is 2.9 years, so around 3 years. Mm-hmm. Would you say this is persevering?
Well, I think that the grant period is 2.9 years. We don't have a limit to the number of years we'll support something, so often we will give 3 or 4 grants of about 3 years each. So about at any given time, about somewhere between 10 and 20% of our grants, we've had a relationship with that organization for more than 10 years. Now, when we're going to have the grant that makes the relationship more than 10 years, the trustees ask that the programs write a rationale as to why we began with this organization, how it's changed as a result of our involvement, and where we see it going forward. I would say, just to pick up on the grantee perception report, that it's a very interesting exercise, because I think those of us who work for foundations, it's an occupational hazard after some years. You think you really are funny and you really are smart and everybody really does like you, because we have so few opportunities to get honest feedback on how we're interacting with partners. And this grantee perception report is a great way to do that. And you do learn things that, yes, nobody ever told you when you went for the site visits.
Yes, and I think one thing you actually learned, and where you did a lot to improve, was in the field of capacity building, because the Euro grantees, they were asking for more capacity building. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, when we did the first grantee perception report 5 years ago, even some of our long-term partners were saying that they appreciated that Oak did a lot of multi-year core support grants, but they wanted more in terms of assistance in improving governance or improving their fundraising capacity or different kinds of institutional strengthening. Now, the way Oak is set up, we're a staff, we have few staff in relation to the amount of money we grant, so we needed to be honest in our feedback to partners that we were not set up to directly provide that capacity building, but as a result of that feedback, we developed a system where we could get third-party providers, hook up our partners with third-party providers and help pay for that, even though we couldn't provide it directly. And 5 years later, we found that the grantees really appreciated that.
Yeah, that's really great, and I think I picked up that for myself too. I think it's a very good thing. We were already discussing about that. Your foundation has been there for quite a while, but what is the long-term strategy of the foundation as a whole organization? Is there such thing around?
We have, as I said, we have 7 different programs. They each have a strategy, but the foundation as a whole, its strategy is to continue with those programs for the time being. We're not a limited life or a spend down foundation. So in principle, we could continue to develop and evolve those programs over a number of generations. As new generations of the family, because we've been in, the family has been involved in philanthropy for 30 years. Oak Foundation, as it now exists, has been in operation about 20 years, which is pretty young compared to some of you out there. So we're only on the second generation of the family. So there is room for subsequent generations to shape the foundation in different ways. I would say for the next, for the foreseeable future, those 7 programs that we have will continue to be continue to evolve and be shaped in relation to what the issues are.
And is that right? Your board of trustees consists only of members of the family?
The board of the trustees of the foundation are all family members.
And you're the only senior person who is not family?
Well, I facilitate the board, and the family has some advisors that will help them and give input on issues, both the way the foundation works and the issues it's working on. But it's clear that me, as well as those advisors, are simply that. We're advisors. We're not formal part of the board.
Okay. And I mean, of course, I assume that the family has many branches and there are many children and so on, but is the existence of the family linked to the existence of family members?
Meaning?
I mean, put it bluntly, if the family dies out, will the foundation shut down?
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay.
I must say, that never occurred to me. I'm not sure. I'm sure there are trusts, you know, that would be, I think, that's at least 50 to 75 years away. So
yes.
I'm not, but that's an interesting question.
So this also mean that the persistence of your foundation is guaranteed by the family being around and being really strongly involved. Yeah.
Yes, and I think as Lynda mentioned, the Oak Foundation is very committed to this patient capital idea. I mean, one of the family members felt very strongly that for instance, the European Common Fisheries Policy was not actually designed to protect fisheries in Europe and to protect Europe's natural resources. So we wanted to get a better common fisheries policy, and it took 15 years to shape a new fisheries policy that actually met the standards that the NGO coalition that we helped fund and promote felt was acceptable. So there is a real staying power when you have a vision of what something should be like and you work in a foundation that can continue to address that problem until it's finished, or at least it moves, it shapes, or takes on a different form.
So what would you say is the characteristic of a work in a foundation which is so much shaped by the family? Is there like, could you coin it in one word or a sentence? What is the main characteristic in working in a family-led foundation?
I think the challenge for staff in family foundations sometimes is to translate the vision and the passion of a family into concrete programs on the ground, and to help develop strategies and frameworks around those passions and around that vision that is ambitious but realistic, that can evolve and move as the issue evolves. Because these things, I think, in family foundations can become very personal. And that's good because they can be very flexible, but sometimes you have to help people see the bigger picture. And I think that's another role staff plays in a family foundation.
I'm sure that this can be shared by many of us who work for families, I think. So thank you very much, and I will now turn to you, Lynda. You've been working for the MAVA Foundation since 2010, and before this, the previous 13 years you worked for the WWF International, also here in Switzerland. And before that, you had a career as a stockbroker in the US, is that right? And you hold an MBA from the University of California. And you work for the MAVA Foundation, and the name of the foundation is made up by the initials of the children of the founder, is that right? And the founder is Luc Hoffmann from the Hoffmann family, and the purpose of the foundation is conserving biodiversity. And you focus geographically in the Mediterranean basin, in West Africa and the Alps, but you also have a number of global programs. So when I looked up you on your website, I was really happy to see that your motto of the foundation was unifying, empowering, flexible, persevering. Here we are. And I thought, yes, that's great. And then I looked a little further, and then I saw that the foundation will actually end in 2022. Okay, so can you explain me how to be persevering and shut down in 2022?
Right. So the 4 values that you talked about came about when we went through a transition of leadership. So we were founded by Dr. Luc Hoffmann, who's a lifelong, passionate conservationist and naturalist. He decided at age, I think it was 86 or 87, he didn't want to do this on a daily basis anymore. He was running the foundation literally from his living room. There was a team of several people sitting in his living room with him. Okay, it was a big living room, it was a nice living room, but it was his living room. In 2010, he decided to step back from the daily operation of the foundation and hand over to his son, Andre. And his son took over as president of the foundation, but didn't want to run it on a day-to-day basis, which is why they went looking for a CEO and they hired me. But there was a real fear amongst our stakeholders about losing what I call the Lucness of the foundation. So we went through a process of speaking to our partners and doing lots of interviews, trying to triangulate what people think is special and different about MAVA. And we tried to identify the Lucness. And that's what these 4 values are: empowering, unifying, flexibility, and persevering. And he, as a lifelong conservationist, knows that it takes a long time to get things done in the environment. These are not quick fixes. Now, Luc also planned for the foundation to end. So he planned both those things. And that date has always been out there, the end in 2022. Now, technically, we're not spending down because we're not capitalized. So we don't have an endowment that we're spending down. We have an income stream that's guaranteed, that comes from the family for a certain number of years. And Luc always said, I didn't intend to create a dynasty. This is my passion, and if my heirs want to carry it forward, that's fine, but he planned the end in, which I think is quite visionary. Now, I understand that some people may think those things are very contradictory, to be persevering and yet to plan an end to the foundation, but I think we still have the long-term approach to the work. And as we're planning our phase out in 2022, we're putting a lot of emphasis on making sure we're creating dynamics that carry on beyond us. So we don't want to think of us stepping back in 2022 as the end. We want to create something that's much more longer term and that will persevere.
But Luc Hoffmann, he hired you, or Andre did, and now he has got such a great team and have such a lovely person as you as a CEO. Has he never changed his mind and saying, well, we should just continue? I mean, you have now a perfect team in place, why should we stop all that? Was this never an idea?
So we had, it was interesting, the session we talked about this morning about whether you can change your mission, change the mission of the foundation. Our statutes are restricted to the environment. Now, very broadly restricted. We can change, and we have changed several times within that very broad envelope. But now we have the second and even the third generation coming along, and they have varied philanthropic interests. It isn't that they don't care about the environment, but they also care about other things. And our statutes don't allow for that. And we were not able to change them. So the answer for us is to sunset this foundation and allow the family to continue their philanthropic efforts through different vehicles that aligns better to their passions. And I don't catastrophize that. I mean, I'm not overly attached to the institution of MAVA. I think it's fantastic that there's such a philanthropic-minded family. There are many of them. And as so long as they're continuing their philanthropy in different ways, I think that's fine. I don't get overly attached to the institution of MAVA.
Yes. So do you have like exit strategies for each of the projects you fund now? Can you give us a little bit more of an insight?
So I've got a master spreadsheet with all of our partners on there. We fund right now 130 different partners, and those are the direct partners. We have about 50 more that are indirect partners. So I actually track them all, and we will be phasing out of all of those partnerships by 2022. Some of them will come sooner. We have what we call, maybe I even shouldn't say this, anyway, we call it either the cliff method, we're going to stop funding, or the slope method, we're going to phase out. So we actually track that. How do we see that relationship going? And we are having individual conversations with every one of our grantees over the course of this year to let them know how we see our future together and whether there is a fit with our strategy that will take us up till 2022, or whether we'll be exiting the relationship earlier than that, and how can we do that in the smoothest way we can. And our commitment is to do this transparently and as early as we possibly can. So not everybody will like a decision that we need to stop funding, but they will know it as early as we can possibly tell them, so that they can plan for it, and we'll help with that planning to the extent that we can.
So you don't start any new project right now?
Yes, we will.
Oh, yes,
so
okay.
we still have 7 years left. We will still spend $500 million with a B Swiss francs between now and 2022.
So any biodiversity projects
we
around
can
here?
do
Here's
a
lady to
lot
ask.
with that money. We can do a lot with it. So we have a new strategy that I'm actually very excited about that builds on our history.
Yes.
So really tries to anchor down the successes of the past 25 years of operation, but isn't only restricted to that. We wanted to stay open enough to what was important without closing those doors, saying, well, if you're not in the door already, then then we're not going to do anything more until then. So there's a balance to be had. The preponderance of our funding will go to carry forward work we've invested in before, but some of that will be new, and 7 years is still a long time to do a lot of things.
Of course, yeah.
So we, as Andre likes to say, we're not trying to create a mausoleum up until 2022. We want to stay alive and fresh until then.
Great.
And there's no reason we can't be so.
Okay, before we give you the opportunity to ask questions to my great guests, I would now like to talk a little bit with you, Andreas. You have been over 10 years the CEO of the St. Gallen Symposium, and you have shaped and co-founded the elea Foundation together with Peter Wuffli in 2007?
2008.
2008, yes. And you're a member of several boards, including Altium Capital, and you're, as I said, also the director of the Max Schmidheiny Foundation, and you hold a Master in Law and Economics of the University of St. Gallen. And, well, maybe it needs a little bit more of an explanation what elea actually does, because when I look on your website, it says there are words popping up like portfolio, investment, investors, pipeline, due diligence, all that kind of stuff, and I was thinking, well, is that really philanthropy, and what's the philanthropy part about it? So can you give us a little bit more of an insight what elea does?
Oh, yes, I really like to do that. The focus of our foundation is fighting poverty with entrepreneurial means. So compared to the two foundations we heard about so far, we are quite a small, focused, mono-focused organization. We believe that to reduce poverty, there are a lot of ways where you can use market mechanisms and companies which could help to do so. This is why our practical work basically includes investing in social companies in areas where people earn less than $2 a day. So this is fighting absolute poverty. People who live below $2 a day really can survive, but not more. So it's really absolute poverty on one side. It is using entrepreneurial focuses, entrepreneurial models, market mechanisms to reach the goal, which means this is why we don't invest in different projects, other not-for-profit organizations, but in social companies, which have to be local. We don't come from outside and tell people, we think you should do that and that and that, and then your life will be wonderful. But we look for entrepreneurs who come from where they live, who have an idea, who push the idea through to a starting period, and then we try to help them to grow, to overcome certain hurdles. And we don't invest only money. Money is always important, we know, but what we see, the most difficult obstacles to overcome are rarely financial. So we help them with know-how, we help them to create a network, and basically very often we really help them to believe in their own idea. So this is what we do. We take shares, we buy equity of the companies if possible, we give long-term loans if necessary, and if we can't buy equity, sometimes we give grants, but that's why we're talking about investing. We really involve as financial partners in a straight way.
So in one sentence, what do you do better than others, like in a classical aid organization?
We are very careful with that. I wouldn't say we do better. We just see that there is a huge, wide field where rarely anyone entered so far. This is the small and medium-sized companies in poor countries who have a huge positive external effect if they prosper, but a lot of hurdles, boundaries, hinderings if they try to grow. They don't get access to finance, they don't get the support they need in knowledge areas, they don't get the people they need, well-educated people. And what we learned from our economies, Switzerland, Germany, Europe didn't grow from big organizations coming and giving them money and say, now we create your economy, but we grew from entrepreneurial people who helped us to shape our economy by believing in their ideas, by living for their ideas, and we try to involve ourselves there because we believe it's the same perspective, the same potential in developing countries. That's not said that we do it better than others, it's just said there is a field no one else is, or not many other organizations are active, and we really would hope that we would create a model for others to do so, because there is a lot of things which you have to do with donation money, that's for sure, but some things are very effective if you only give an impulse, if you only lend money, and if you are patient enough to accompany for a certain time, and then you might even get your money back and still have a huge social benefit.
So how long would be an average duration of your involvement?
Normally 5 to 7 years.
And what is the exit then? What's the exit strategy?
I mean, the ideal exit, and we always talk about three things. First of all, we do due diligence, which might last almost half a year, even sometimes even longer, to really know our partner. It's the financial perspectives, the business perspectives we have to understand, and the impact perspectives. We really have to make sure that it is a positive external effect this partner creates. The second thing is, and this is important, what could be our contribution? We call this a value creation plan. What do we want to achieve in the future together? What is our partner? What does he have to do? And what is our challenge? What do we take care of ourselves or with partners, with companies, with investors we involve? And the third issue, that's then the exit. We make clear from the very beginning what our exit plans is. Pay back over a certain time of period, sell back of the shares to the founders, sell of the shares to maybe an impact investor who might expect a little more financial results than we do and might be a little less patient than we are. So we try to gradually lead our partners to what we call capital market accessibility. And we agree on that in the beginning. We try hard to stick to it, but we have to say if there are reasons to renegotiate, we bring the flexibility which is necessary for our partner to have the room he really needs to develop. That means we are flexible enough to see if it needs 1 or 2 years more, or if it needs a completely different involvement from our side to renegotiate and focus on that if we believe it could help.
So would you say, could it be said that you leverage what your partners do by also investing your knowledge and your time also? It's not only about investing money, but also investing your time?
Definitely, and I think time is very precious. Our founder, Peter Wuffli, always says, look, one part is capital, but the other part is the time of all the people we involve to make an idea a success. It's the people on the ground, the local people, but it's as well our staff. We have a responsibility that we have a clear idea what success means, and that we create an environment where we all can, at least theoretically, be successful, because everyone invests at least his personal time, and for our staff, it's their career they invest. So time plays a very, very important role in this perspective.
Just one last question. I read in your annual letter that you have built up a circle of friends as co-investors, and it says, quote, they're important basis for the long-term development of the foundation. Does it mean that you're running out of money currently? Or?
This is a very interesting aspect. From the very beginning, our founder did not want to build a monument. So our focus was on how much impact can we create with a starting capital of 20 million Swiss francs. And then we were quite sure that we only can achieve the impact we need and the trustworthiness for our partner if we do not only rely on the returns of what our capital create on the financial markets, but we can spend our capital. So we started from the very beginning to spend our capital with the perspective and the plan that we should be able to create something which is convincing enough, strong enough to motivate others to invest on our platform with us in our partners. We have some of our investors here who support us in this endeavor. We have 19 partners, investors at the moment who invest into our portfolio. We call this elea philanthropic investment management, who share our goals, who share our passion for entrepreneurial solutions for poverty. And so our strategy and our vision would be that on this basis, elea survives and creates more impact. And the most important aspect is we have to convince a market as well. We have to convince partners that it's worth to invest into this cause. And this makes a huge difference, I think, if you talk to your partners in the field and you tell them, yeah, we know it's difficult, but you have to be entrepreneurial and there is a market and it will work and it's positive. And then you go home and say, you know, I have a safe life because I have a huge foundation and they give me money and I don't have to worry too much about whether my dears pays back. What is important about that is this works for the field of fighting poverty with a very special focus. I would not say that this works for every kind of social challenges and environmental challenges we have. But there are certain areas, I think, where it works, and that's what we believe. I mean, we are young, we are small, as I said. I'm actually a minority on this panel, German-speaking male. But we try by learning, by getting better to prove that this model has a future.
Okay, so now we got to know 3 great people from great organizations, and now the floor is yours to ask questions to each of them. I'm sure you have many things which you would like to ask.
I have a question for Kathleen and especially also for Lynda. I mean, when you start a new program or a new project, do you already know from the beginning that that will be really a long-term period you stay in, or is that sometimes surprising how things develop, and what does it make with the staff, the people they work in? I mean, I suppose it's something different whether you work in an area in the foundation where you have different projects and it's more quick changing, or whether you realize, oh, that's something I also stick in for the next 10 years. How does this is from the beginning?
Okay, I think that's an interesting question, and it depends completely on what the goal is that you're trying to do. For instance, we have a cluster of grants around trying to change social norms around the sexual exploitation of children. So to create a society in which the sexual exploitation of children is not tolerated, that, you know, from the beginning is going to be a long process. It's not one 3-year grant. It's not 10 3-year grants. You're talking about a generation. On the other hand, you might have a goal of getting improved domestic violence legislation passed in Moldova, which is one of the countries we work in. So for a project like that, we say, well, over the next, let's say 5 years, if we have a cluster of 7 to 10 grants, all focused on trying to support the government and pressure the government of Moldova to improve its domestic violence legislation, we would say we should be able to do that. We should be able to help achieve that in a specified period of time. Now, we might get it done sooner, it might take longer, but we would see that as something with an end. But I would say at least a quarter to a third of the issues that Oak is working on are social justice issues that we know are going to take a very long time. Now, in achieving that goal, maybe particular grants or the role of particular organizations you see as finite. I mean, that organization is going to contribute something specific to that goal. But the goal itself, you know that if you're not going to be in it for the long term, you could actually do more harm than good by getting involved.
Lynda, would you like to say something to it?
So I have 2 answers to the question. One is before we got serious about our exit, and one is after we got serious about our exit. So as I said before, we always knew that date was out there. When I was hired, I was told it was only until 2022, and it felt so far away at that time, so distant. But all of a sudden, it doesn't feel so far away. But even though we knew that date was out there, when we made allocation decisions on projects, we paid attention to how long-term we thought we were going to be committing to when we elected to support a project. I would say now we pay a lot of attention to that because we know we have an end to our grant making. It's of the utmost importance that we know where they're going and how they're going to survive without us. And we don't want to make a deep investment in something that's then going to fall apart when we're not there anymore. So we're looking for other donors to be interested, we're looking for ways of them to become self-sustaining, or we're looking for other kinds of exit to be more explicit when we make the decisions on whether to fund. And we have those conversations very explicitly with the grantees as well, so that they know, look, we're seeing this as a one-time grant only, you will not get anything more after this, which we've had to do because of our past history of funding many partners over and over, often for the same project in a second and third or maybe fourth phase, which was justified, but we're not doing that anymore. So we have an explicit and open conversation with the grantees and pay a lot of attention to what our exit will look like.
Yes, please.
Etienne Eichenberger. In family business, the succession is a big issue, and you have both presented different models at MAVA and at the Oak Foundation. So my first question would be to both of you. When founders in the room have new generations, what is your one tips to get the new generation in? So that would be my questions. And to Andreas, we have learned this morning that IMD will launch a chair on family philanthropy funded by a family. And since you also have a chair at IMD, what would be your expectation of what a chair on family philanthropy can help on this?
Maybe Andreas like to answer first?
Sorry, Etienne. What my expectations would be to...
Yeah, well, the role can be of a new chair with the second chair now in Switzerland in philanthropy, focusing on family philanthropy. So what would be your perspective, how such a chair can enhance, facilitate, or foster, the great example of the three of you we've heard?
Thank you. I think there is a third chair coming up because there will be another chair at IMD, a chair for social innovation, which has a certain overlap with the activities of the SEPs in one side and of the family philanthropy. I think what we see now and what I would expect is that we now create academic capabilities, academic resources to work with all the experience, with all the data we all create in our daily work. For us, during the last 8 years, we had the opportunity, first of all, to learn a lot, second, to collect data, to work with different, almost paradox situations. What we are clearly lacking is the time and the resources to properly rethink all this, to work with the data, to create new analytical models and things like that. And this is what I would hope comes from the academia now in Europe, even more in the US. They are certainly ahead with that, that we start like it was in business administration almost 40 years ago when the first business administration chairs came up. Now it's an established discipline, that we have a vivid exchange from the practical experience we make in our daily work on one side and the theoretical thinking of what could be next, what could be new approaches, what could be helpful. And for me, the field where I really like to compare is economics or even more business administration, where you see that successes in theory, successes in research positively influence practical work. This would be my hope, and that's why I'm very happy that the one or other chair is coming up at different universities. With IMT especially, because on executive education you have a straight impact into today's leadership world already.
Okay, thank you. So now we have the last question on the involvement of the next generation. Could you say something how you got the next generation on board and what you did to get them involved on?
Well, I would say the advice on how to do it would depend a lot on the reason for setting up the foundation in the first place. Some foundations are really all about bringing the family together around philanthropy, and I think Oak is very much like that. There has to be a trustee that's passionate about one of the programs to do it. Our foundation was really issue-driven. It was around one theme that we wanted to invest in deeply. So I think there are different models. But I think there are ways of bringing in the new generations and taking account of their interests and even involving them at early stages. I've seen lots of different ways that can happen. In our particular case, we now have the third generation as a member of the board. So it's a 23-year-old son of Andre, who's a fantastic young man. And I think managing that transition is delicate. I think he's handled it with a lot of grace. It's hard to come in and be with your parents and your parents' friends and your grandfather and try to have something to say in that context. And so I think how you handle that transition and how you help give confidence to the new generation will have a critical role to play in how passionate they become about philanthropy or about any particular cause.
I think, can you say something also about your involvement in getting the next generation on board?
Yeah, I think I agree with what Lynda said. In Oak, the founders have been very thoughtful about succession. The couple who founded Oak Foundation turned the leadership of the foundation over to their 3 children about 6 years ago when they are still on the board, they're still active. So there's been an opportunity for the second generation to grow into those roles, still having the guidance of the founders there. And it's actually been a very smooth, I think, unifying process for the family. We're now just looking at the third generation moving in and trying to think about what would be the best ways. We don't have a lot of experience yet. We're trying to get the third generation involved in networks of young philanthropists, one of which WISE is operating. Also, they come and are interns at Oak Foundation as well as in other foundations. And I think that we're now going to go through the process, and I do feel a responsibility, as do other staff at Oak, to try to make that as smooth as possible, because as Lynda said, it's not always obvious. You know, how does the younger generation have a genuine voice in shaping the new programs, or even saying, well, you know, if we're taking over, we really don't want to do this program anymore. We'd like to do something else. And how does that, we haven't gotten there yet, but I expect in the next 10 to 15 years, that'll be something that Oak will be facing.
Maybe I could just add a quick thing to that.
Yes, please.
If I reflect on our experience of the founder handing over leadership to his son, I have so much admiration for how he did that. And he said, okay, this is your baby now. And he may not agree with every decision, and there was a short phase there where we were kind of in between and it was a little bit difficult to manage, but he's so clearly now in the camp of, I want you to run with this, I want you to make of this what you will make of it. So I think it depends a lot on how the founders themselves and each generation hands over to the successive generation.
So thank you very much. We had a very persevering discussion here on the stage, and thank you for all your great contributions. And now there will be some more body time or spirit time. I don't know, housekeeping here. Now it's workshop, and I think you can grab a coffee on your way there. And please go to your workshop and enjoy your time. Thank you very much.